So welcome everybody to day 3 of the 2021 Planetary Health Annual Meeting, co-hosted by the University of Sao Paulo and the Planetary Health Alliance. I'm Sam Myers, Director of the Planetary Health Alliance based here in Boston. I'm really pleased to be introducing this panel entitled The Role of Business in Leading the Protein Revolution. In a lot of ways, this is sort of a drill down on the last panel that we just had, in which Bruce Friedrich started to talk a little bit about the protein revolution. So now we're gonna have a chance to really drill into it in some real depth. There's no issue that's more central to the field of planetary health than food systems. Our food system is responsible for more environmental transformation, biodiversity loss, land use change, pollution of air, water, and soil, climate change, than any other dimension of human activity. At the same time, that transformation of the world's biophysical conditions at the fastest rates in the history of our species is threatening the quality and the quantity of food that we can produce, with worrisome impacts on global nutrition. As such, food system innovation is central to achieving the Great Transition. This innovation is needed across really 3 domains. One's reducing food waste, another is changing what the world eats, and the third is changing how we produce our food. And today's panel is really focused more on the last of these, on how we produce food. Today's panel will focus on really how we achieve the rapid, deep structural change at the scale that's needed, and starts with the premise that we're going to need the private sector in order to do that. So we're enormously lucky today to have 4 really visionary leaders in this area of food system transformation in the private sector to help us think about those issues. First, I have the privilege of introducing our moderator, Diane Holdorf. Diane is the Managing Director of Food and Nature at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development since December of 2018. In this role, she leads business efforts to accelerate the much needed transformation in areas of food, nature, and water. Before joining WBCSD, Diane worked for the Kellogg Company for 10 years, finishing as Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer and focusing full-time on advancing Kellogg's sustainability leadership efforts. Diane serves on a whole bunch of advisory boards and was recognized by Oxfam as a Sister on the Planet ambassador, which is super cool. And despite having over 4,800 registrants for this conference from 128 countries, I suspect that Diane is the only person here who's been named by the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center as a maize and wheat superwoman. Diane, the floor is yours.
Sam, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here today and to welcome this panel, to have what is going to be an incredibly crucial conversation building on the total discussions had over these 3 days for the Planetary Health Annual Meeting. And I love that you call it a festival as well. We'll look forward to doing that festivity in person again at some point here in the future. But the topic of our conversation here at hand really speaks to, Sam, what you teed up around innovation and around shifting diets and how we produce our food and what it takes to actually urgently transform this food system upon which we all depend and due to which so many of us, but not all of us, can thrive. So as we think through what are the different solution sets, we have some incredible innovation leaders here with us today. And it is my absolute honor to bring them forward into conversation, hear from each of them on the work that they're uniquely leading, and then to move us into a conversation around what does it really take to start to scale solutions. The space that we're talking about today is the role of business in leading the protein revolution. And why protein? It's an absolute essential nutrient. It's one that all of us depend on. Many of us get too much. Some of us still get too little. And yet how it's produced and the quantity, the quality, the type sit at some of the most significant conversations that we have relative to transforming the food system. And it's one of the areas where innovation really will truly create new solutions for us. We have to be looking together at both how we have sufficient, healthy, sustainable sources of protein, and what it means to shift consumer diets in culturally appropriate ways in each of the regions of the world where this work is underway. So with that, let me please welcome our speakers today. We're going to hear from each of them, setting up some of the work that they're doing and then leading us into conversation. I welcome Ethan Brown, leading the revolution at Beyond Meat. And I know we're going to have some exciting news from you today. Ethan, we'll go to you first, and then Bruce Friedrich, welcoming you in from the Good Food Institute. Some very visionary work underway under your leadership that is going to help us think about how we're framing these conversations and the work to be done, particularly as the role of business and what it means to scale. And then Thomas Jonas, who's got a really very unique, innovative space in this conversation from Nature's Find. And it'll be really exciting to hear more about that work that you and your team are leading. But first, let me turn and open the conversation to Ethan. Please share with us a bit about the transformative work that you're leading.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, it's such a pleasure to be with you and to be part of this. I admire so much the focus of this organization and what Sam is driving, and it's sorely needed in the world, and it's an intersection of things that I care deeply about. So it's very much a pleasure to be here. So Beyond Meat, we are every day fascinated and energized by the fact that you can, in doing one thing, which is changing the protein at the center of the plate from a animal-based to a plant-based source, can solve for, or at least contribute to, 4 very significant issues, whether it's human health and the issues around heart disease, diabetes, cancer, which we worry so much about, or climate, or natural resources in terms of the use of land, energy, and water, or finally animal welfare. I became really focused on how can you utilize that 2 or 3 ounce piece of protein in the center of the plate to make an impact across all 4 of those things. I've never seen anything in my career like that. I came out of the energy sector where I worked for a number of years for a proton exchange membrane fuel cell company, which was doing great work for climate. But looking at this problem and seeing the opportunity to impact all 4 of those issues that I care so much about was just too meaningful to pass up. And the results that you get when you start to shift, not from a diet that is meat-centered to one that is vegetable-centered, but rather one that remains meat-centered, but with a plant-based meat, you get some pretty extraordinary outcomes. We did a study with the University of Michigan where we looked at replacing a hamburger from a cow with a hamburger from the Beyond Meat system in terms of the impact on the environment. We had 93% less land use, we had 99% less water, 90% fewer emissions, and we used about half the energy. So the solves that are in those numbers are so important, and we care so much about them. I find there almost to be a spiritual curiosity in the fact that what's good for the earth is also good for your body. And I always look at that question at a sort of metaphysical level. I find it interesting. And if you look at the work we're doing with Stanford, it's apparent that you can really drive great health results from switching to a Beyond Meat diet over a standard animal meat diet. The first study we did, and we're going to be doing more of these over time, really looked at 2 key indices around health. One was LDL, so what they call bad cholesterol, and the other was TMAO, which is something in the gut that's very closely associated with heart disease. We were able to drive both statistically and clinically significant reductions in both of those key health indices just by switching, nothing else in the diet, but just by switching from an animal protein to Beyond Meat protein for an 8-week period. So we feel really good about the environmental benefits. We feel really good about the health benefits, but we're going to keep driving, in each case, our improvements there. If you look at what we're doing on product development, we have a program here called Beyond Meat Rapid and Relentless Innovation. And the purpose there is to make the products that are currently on the shelf with our name on them obsolete. There's nobody in the world that wants to replace those products more than me. We have competition that would like to take that space, but I want to replace those products with products that are better. And what's one of the things that is, we have so much fun here, but one of the things that's frustrating is that I know that there are products in our lab that are better than the products on the shelf. And so we're constantly trying to reduce the time that it takes to get those products from the lab to the shelf. And we just recently did that with the Beyond Burger 3.0, which offers a closer approximation of the taste and sensory experience of beef. And if you think about what comprises beef, it's in terms of the taste, it's roughly 4,000 molecules. And our job is to find those molecules within beef and then extract them and match them with molecules in plants that are going to give the consumer the same experience. We're getting closer with this product, but we're also doing it in a way that's healthier. We have fewer calories. We have 35% less saturated fat than 80/20 beef, less overall fat, et cetera. So we keep driving this health proposition. Before I close my opening comments, I wanted to just make a comment around how this is possible. You know, if you take a step back and you look at the structure of life, you know, in animals, it's really, I always think about this as kind of three buckets. You have your materials, which we all share, common materials, hydrogen, you know, carbon, nitrogen, et cetera. And you have a nervous system and sensory experience, right? We have a common shared origin for that system. And then finally, we have a genetic code, right? And so these are the three main pieces of life. Well, if you look across animals and plants, you can see vast similarities. And life is in fact united by its constituent parts. So you see the same materials being used by plants, and you see in fact the same DNA structure, right? In terms of what's driving the genetic coding. So what we're doing at Beyond Meat is simply blurring that line. We're taking from the plant that which the animal used to deliver to us. And so I had an experience the other day where I was hiking and it was early in the morning, and far off on the trail, I saw what I thought was a scattering of leaves. And I thought nothing of it, just kept walking. As I got closer, it turned out to be a scattering of feathers. We're in an area with a lot of coyotes, so I think it was a bird that had been taken down. But what fooled my eye was the bilateral symmetry. So just like a leaf is exactly the same on both sides, so is the feather, right? And that sort of, to me, serves as a really powerful metaphor for what we're doing. What is in the animal is also in plants, and we're simply taking it directly from the plants instead of running those plants through the animal. And that's what gives us all the efficiencies that I just talked about, as well as the health benefits, because we are able to keep out of the product so many things that we're trying to avoid in high animal protein consumption diets, whether it's the high cholesterol, whether it's the heterocyclic amines, whether it's heme iron, all these things that we have concerns about, we can just keep out of our products.
Ethan, that's great. Thank you for those opening comments. It's actually quite inspiring to hear.
Well, thank you.
Poetic reference for the role that you're taking and driving through the inspiration that your company leads as well. I think, you know, before I move on to Bruce, just a couple of themes I'll pick up, particularly given the focus that we have here on the role of business in leading this revolution. You've touched very specifically on the important role of innovation for business, but I think one of the things that you touched on was the acceleration of that and how you're using pressure and acceleration to really address the urgency of this issue, keeping it very grounded in science to address both health and sustainability. I know those are going to be themes we're going to be coming back to. One other thing that you really touched on, however, was the role and the importance of partners in doing this, and that business needs those partners to accomplish some of these big transformations. So thank you for bringing in some of the themes I'm sure that we will come back to in our conversation. Bruce, let me open it up to you now. Please give us a bit more insight about the work you're leading with the team at the Good Food Institute and how this helps to inform our ongoing conversation.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen, Diane?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, excellent. I'm not as beautiful as Ethan, so I need a PowerPoint in order to walk me through what I want to chat about briefly. But I know we're going to chat a little bit more.
Bruce, I'm desperately trying to take my system off mute to contradict that. You're a very handsome man.
Aw, thank you. So I know Ethan nodded at this, but I just want to mention again how inefficient it is that we funnel crops through animals. Methane is more than 20 times as powerful as carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Ruminant digestion is a huge source of methane and consequently global warming. Nitrous oxide from manure decomposition also is it's more than 200 times as potent as a greenhouse gas. And one of the great things about Ethan's system and Thomas's system, and the reason that Bill Gates is such a strong supporter of both Beyond Meat and Nature's Find, is it takes the climate mantra of electrify everything, and it applies it to food. So it basically allows us to concentrate the climate impact in the factory it removes multiple stages of production, and it becomes a massive climate advantage. Something Ethan didn't mention, well, actually two global health, sort of broader global health issues. One of them is antibiotic resistance. This is a cover story from the New York Times about 18 months ago. 70 to 80% of all antibiotics used globally are fed to farm animals, which is a huge problem. It's contributing to antibiotic resistance, which the UK government says is a more certain threat to the human race than climate change. And we're all living through a pandemic. Last July, the UN Environment Program released a report, Preventing the Next Pandemic. They listed the 7 most likely causes. The first one is just eating meat. The second one is concentration of animal agriculture. The 7th one is climate change. So shifting to systems like Ethan's and Thomas's are what the UN Environment Program says is extraordinarily likely to help us prevent the next pandemic. And we just need a reality check. According to the UN, we're going to need 50 to 100% more meat by 2050 if we stay on our current trajectory. And the beauty of using business to solve this problem, exactly what Ethan was just talking about, we can make meat from plants. We can cultivate meat from cells, which is what Thomas is doing with whole biomass fermentation. So this is a phone, even though it doesn't connect to a wall. And this is also a camera, even though it doesn't have analog film. We can make meat from plants. We can cultivate meat from cells. We can give consumers everything that they like about meat. We can give them the precise meat experience. But because what Ethan and Thomas are doing is so much more efficient, we can get to a place at which it costs less. The Good Food Institute is focused on this from the nonprofit standpoint. We have 3 programmatic areas. We are the only NGO in the world that has full-time PhD scientists focused on plant-based cultivated meat and whole biomass fermentation, the only nonprofit organization. And we have about a dozen in the United States, as well as scientists across our 5 affiliate offices. We work on industry partnerships from the smallest to the largest corporations, as well as investors. And then we work on policy. So super quickly on the science and technology side, we have 15 programs on university campuses. It's called our Alt Protein Project, where we're basically trying to make sure everybody who is a chemical engineer or a plant biologist or a meat scientist or a tissue engineer or a recombinant protein specialist, we want to make sure that the professors and the students and the grad students, that they all recognize that they can solve those massive problems by going to work at Beyond Meat or Nature's Find, or joining GFI by devoting themselves to alternative proteins. We have monthly webinars called The Science of Alt Protein, and would encourage people to join those. And we publish lots of open access research to try to lift the entire field of alternative proteins. Our organizational battle cry is that governments should be funding this transition. Just like governments put billions of dollars into standard agricultural research, they put tens of billions of dollars into renewable energy. Even pre-COVID, they put more than $100 billion into global health initiatives. We want to see governments both funding open access science and incentivizing private sector R&D and build out. And then we work with corporations. We have a monthly seminar, The Business of Alt Proteins. And we help startups, we help investors, and we work with the biggest companies in the world to make this a transition rather than a disruption. For people who want more information on our business resources, we're kind of a think tank for alternative proteins. Check out gfi.org/industry. And that is GFI in a nutshell.
Bruce, well done. You covered a lot of ground, literally, in what you just shared there, and really demonstrated how the Good Food Institute is sitting at the heart of much of what it's going to take to scale these types of transformations. And that's something that we're absolutely going to come back to. But I also appreciated that you placed this conversation within the center of 3 of our biggest global conversations: climate, disease management, and the pandemics, and how we think about food and our food systems and shifting those quickly enough to address those big challenges. So we're going to come back to many of those themes. But before we do, Thomas, let me please turn it over to you. I think Bruce did quite a bit of tee up for some of the interesting news that you'll be sharing with us and the leadership role that Nature Find is taking in this conversation. So over to you so we can hear some more.
Hi, Diane. Well, it's as I was listening to Ethan and Bruce, my brain was boiling. It's so exciting to see their perspectives here, to see the work that Ethan and Bruce have done. I encourage everybody to look at the last letter from GFI, where Bruce was reminding us all that 5 years ago, this entire field did not exist. And I think this is really a testament of the dynamism of this industry, and that's extraordinarily exciting. And I think it should fill us all with optimism to see the progress, to see the ability of this sector to find solutions to address some of the very hard problems that we're facing today. So the part that we try to play here on Nature's Find is maybe a little different than or we do this in a way that may be a little bit different than the way a lot of people do it. Our company started as a research project for NASA. And the goal of this initial research was to try to figure out, if NASA was going to send a probe to a moon of Saturn, what would be the environment in which it would make sense to look for life. So if you go to the depths of the methane lakes of Titan, or if you go to the geysers of Enceladus, what form of life do you look for? How do you even look for it? And of course, that has an impact on how you structure the probe that you're going to send. And so trying to figure out some of the answer to that very tough question is what led my co-founder, Mark Kozubal, under the guidance of Professor Bielinski, to go to a place that is a little bit different than what we have on the rest of planet Earth, and that's the volcanic acidic springs of Yellowstone National Park. So for those of you who are not familiar with Yellowstone National Park, it's a beautiful national park, the first national park in the history of America. It's in the northwest of the United States. It's about half, the whole Yellowstone basin is about half the size of Switzerland, and it's actually sitting on a massive lava chamber. So it's really half of Switzerland sitting on a volcano. And because of this very unique geology environment, you have about 15,000 geothermal features. So that means springs and geysers that go through an incredible piping underground. And as a result, when this water comes out, they look like no other water in the world. And we studied in particular one spring that has a pH, which means a level of acidity equivalent to your car battery. And it's a very different environment than the one we typically experience, than the one we live in. But what should fill us up with optimism here is that life found a way to colonize even that very extreme environment. And what we discovered is that under this very incredible environmental pressure over millions of years, some microbial life forms managed to adapt, and they develop strategies that are based on really efficiency and improving efficiency. They learn to do more with less because they live in this very barren environment. And I think today, there is no bigger challenge for our generation but to learn to do more with less. This is the call of our entire generation. This is the call for everyone who is listening to this panel today. So we discovered a bunch of several microbial organisms. One in particular, which is absolutely fascinating. So it's an acidophile. It can survive in a very acidic environment. It is 50% protein. It's a complete protein, which is pretty rare for non-animal form. It's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's part of this third branch of life that we tend to forget about, although it's all around us, and that's the fungal realm. So it's part of the fungi category. Saying it's like a mushroom would be a little misleading. It's really a microbe. The thing that's fascinating with fungi is that they're actually closer to you and me than they are to a carrot. When the tree of life separated, fungi and us first went one way, plant went another way. And as a result of that, those organisms have very unique cellular machinery and very high level of protein. Now, I said that they're very efficient, and we had to develop a new technology to cultivate them. There is nowhere in the book where it tells you how to cultivate acidophile fungi. So we had to invent a new fermentation system, and we call it a liquid air interface system. So we, instead of the classic big tank bioreactor, we use a tray-based system, which is a very simple and elegant solution. There's a lot of complex problems that we had to solve to make that happen, but it enables us to be extraordinarily efficient. What it means is that with 1 ton of sugar, we are able to make 2 tons of meat-like product. And you just have to compare that with a cow, which obviously, and Bruce and Ethan are probably smiling right now. As we all know, 90% of what goes in the front of the cow goes out in the back of the cow, or between the evaporation, or is used to for the cow's thoughts. So it's not an efficient system. And I think both Ethan and Bruce made a parallel with energy, and I think that's actually a very, very relevant comparison here. There is a I wouldn't call it a secret, but a not very well-known fact in the world, which is that the cow, the chicken, you and me, we don't make protein. A cow doesn't make protein. And if you think in energy term, a cow is really a battery, right? A cow is really accumulating in its body the protein that it's taking from the plants it's eating. That is really where the protein is coming. A cow doesn't have the ability to create a nitrogen bond, which defines the protein. There are only 2 sources that can generate the protein, and those are plants. And we've been working with plants with about 11,000 years, and microorganisms. And I think today we are really here at Nature's Fund starting to spearhead the cultivation of this entire new continent of options through microbes. We can cultivate microbes here at Nature's Fund in a way that we get phenomenal protein, and that's really our mission here.
Thomas, thank you. That was quite a journey. Started with NASA, nurtured in Yellowstone, leveraging microbial creativity, and then throwing in a bit of that sort of COVID cultural phenomenon of fermentation as well, get us to what is actually an incredibly transformational result for what we could think about for how we drive this protein revolution. So I appreciate that thinking. So Ethan and Bruce and Thomas, you've each brought us a different lens of the role of business in driving this transformation. You've each spoken to the opportunity within it. I haven't heard quite as much about the urgency and the speed. I think, Thomas, you said at the very beginning of your moment here, 5 years ago, this sector didn't even exist. WBCSD has been working in this space. We published a protein roadmap in January of 2020 that really didn't sufficiently feature the role of alternative proteins in what we need to do. And now we're working on rewriting that. Bruce, you're leading much of the thinking in that. And Ethan and Thomas, you're at the forefront of driving the technologies. But let's talk about what that means from a speed of transformation. What does business need to be prepared to do to respond to the speed with which we're seeing consumer awareness, consumer demand, as well as other drivers pushing us in this direction?
Sure, so I could
for us, then Bruce, maybe we'll hear a bit from you as well. Go ahead, Ethan.
Okay, sure. So, speed is one of my favorite subjects, so I'm happy to talk about it. Urgency is really important at Beyond Meat. Our scientific center here is actually called the Manhattan Beach Project, and it's called that because we're near the beach. But more importantly, I wanted to evoke that sense of urgency of the Second World War and the combination of trying to find the best and brightest scientists and match them with civil engineers and with managers that were capable of getting something done under a very short period of time that was meaningful for the world. And so, if you think about, like, if I go back to some of the folks that really educated me on these issues. I think about Robert Goodland, who used to be at the World Bank, Jeff and Hang, who's still at IFC. Just the urgency with which they speak about trying to solve. My own father, for example, talks a lot about this in his work. Solve the climate crisis. We don't have enough time to do it, right? We're so far behind, and so radical change is required. What I love about this solution is that it has a radical outcome, but it has a very incremental change with respect to human behavior. All you have to do is simply swap out the protein and send the plate. We can't do it fast enough. And so, we went out and raised a bunch of money recently in the public markets to increase the speed at which we're doing this. We also have to work very quickly, not only here in the US, to make it acceptable to do what we're doing, but to also in China and in other parts of the world, Latin America, et cetera, make sure that we get ahead of any efforts to replicate our food system, right? And so we need to keep after that. But really, the urgency for us is around three quick things. One is continue to drive the sensory experience, so it's indistinguishable from animal protein. Two is to continue to improve the consumer understanding of the nutritional benefits of our product, even as we make them healthier. And then three is to drop the price below that of animal protein. If we get those three things, I think you win.
Yeah, that accessibility piece is actually quite key. Thank you for bringing that up as well. Bruce, when you were talking, you really drove into some of these things that we need for scale. You were talking about policy, you were talking about funding, much like Ethan was just speaking to now. Help build on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Diane. And I think we can't overstate the urgency of the situation that we're in. Climate change is an emergency. There aren't any scientists who think we can solve climate without solving meat. The way that meat is produced now is a bigger contributor to climate change than all forms of transportation combined. What Ethan and Thomas are doing can cut the adverse impact by 90%. And one of the really great things about shifting the way that meat is made, it doesn't just cut direct emissions, it also frees up vast quantities of land that can be turned into carbon sinks. So they can be used for rewilding, they can be used for regenerative ranching, they depress the adverse impact on forests. So it's sort of a multifaceted solution. But antibiotic resistance is the end of modern medicine, according to the World Health Organization. That's why the UK government has called it a greater threat to humanity than climate change. And we all know what pandemics look like. And, we it's tough to say lucky looking at what's happening in India and Brazil right now, but that could have been the whole world. This could have been more transmissible. It could have been more deadly even than it is. And we're basically courting these things. So we really need companies like Ethan's and Thomas's to be successful as fast as possible. And the really great thing about this theory of change, exactly what we're just saying, doesn't require consumers to change how they think about food at all. So the reason GFI is in Israel and Singapore, which is where 2 of our 5 affiliate offices are located, is not because we care what people eat in Israel and Singapore. We spend no time trying to convince anybody to change how they're eating. We're in those countries because those governments care about food security. Consequently, they care about alternative proteins. They're technologically very advanced, and solutions that are discovered in Israel or Singapore or any place else in the world, they scale globally because they work with human nature rather than against human nature. We need solutions to the food and agriculture problem that reach the farthest reaches of the earth. And making meat in a different way does exactly that.
I think that's such a key point. Please, Tom.
Diane, yeah, if I may add just a couple of points, fully aligned with what Ethan and Bruce were saying. I think it is important also to keep in mind that if we want to have impact, it is crucial that this category goes beyond, and I say that as, we are a company that's supported by venture capitalists, but it has to go beyond winning on the shelf of the Whole Food in Palo Alto, right? It's important. We have to do that. There's a lot of reasons for why it matters. But what really matters to have an impact at the planetary level is to bring this solution in regions that are going to be craving this protein. And we're talking about Asia, we're talking about China, we're talking about India. And to Ethan's point, being able to generate a protein solution that is competitive, that we can manufacture in this region of the world is absolutely essential. That is how we have an impact. That is how we make a difference. So I need just find, we're a pre-revenue company. We already have people on the ground in Singapore, in India. This has always been top of mind for us. We need to think about these things in a very, very global way because it's a global problem. It's called global warming. So it's not just limited to one particular region of the world. The second
Thomas,
comment,
if I can ask you, sorry, please, then just please build with what you're going to add and then share with us a little bit about what you see the particular needs are to scale the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so for us, we are inventing a new system of protein. What we do is really a new protein platform that has a pretty incredible versatility. So we can make dairy alternative, a wide range of dairy alternative, just as well as a range of meat alternative, whether it's pork, whether it's chicken, whether it's beef, and all of these are things that we have already developed and that we can do today. What we have to build is our own supply chain, because we're creating this protein, we're assembling this protein using one of nature's most amazing solution. So it's very important for us to rapidly scale up. And so Ethan was mentioning the need to raise funding. It is critical. And the reality is that there is no other way to do that. And you guys can, we can all try to walk into our local Bank of America or whatever banking around the corner and ask for a few $1 million to scale up a microbial system to feed the world. It's a little more complicated than that, right? So this funding aspect is important. And so we have to do these things, and money matters when you need to scale up and create all these new infrastructure. But that's also where private and public sector can work together. We wouldn't be here as a company without NASA, without the USDA, without the EPA, without the National Science Foundation. So there is really a phenomenal partnership between public and private sector here that I think would create and foster an engine of innovation.
Great. So funding is key. Bruce, we heard from you, policy plays a role in this. What I found you to say, Bruce, that I was quite fascinated by, knowing that we have big consumer shifts we're working on, and Ethan, you've really touched on this as well. Bruce, you were talking about the fact that you're working with governments who are investing in these spaces, who are not trying to be driven by consumer demand, but are trying to influence through the work at the government and the investment level, frankly, what just comes to shelf, it sounds like. So just, and maybe wrap that into some closing comments, if you don't mind, Bruce, and then I'll turn to Thomas and Ethan as well for that opportunity. But with that in mind, what would you leave us with? What are the actions that business needs to take now to help to drive this transformation further?
Well, taking a step back to your first question, the Holy Grail, think about this in terms of renewable energy or electric vehicles. So the idea of renewable energy and electric vehicles is that we make them what simply powers our lives and what we simply drive, because they give consumers everything that they like about turning on the lights or turning on the refrigerator, everything they like about driving at a lower price. So that's basically what we're trying to do with renewable energy. Bill Gates calls it the green premium. We want to eliminate the green premium. For meat, we want to give consumers everything that they like about meat. So it needs to taste just as delicious as meat, and it needs to cost less than that. And you can have a sort of niche market where people have to pay more, or a niche market where it doesn't taste as good to consumers. But the Holy Grail, if we want this to scale globally, and we look at what the UN says about meat, it just tracks with incomes. The Holy Grail is to take consumer choice off the table and not have to rely on behavior change all over the world, but to change how meat is made in the same way we've changed how phones are made, in the same way we're changing how our lives are powered, in the same way we're changing the cars that we drive. So further to what Thomas just said, and in fact, Ethan's company started out of USDA research at the University of Missouri. Thomas was talking about funding that he got from the government. This could happen through the private sector. But for the same reason governments are funding the transition to renewable energy, Tesla would have failed in the late 2000s if not for government incentives for Tesla. We need that sort of commitment to making meat in this better way. Because if we don't have that, the urgency, the planet is on fire, and we're basically courting the end of working antibiotics in the next pandemic. We need to eliminate those risks as quickly as possible, and government should be right behind helping businesses to think this way and innovate in this way.
Yeah, a lot of really key drivers there, a lot of points around which I think anybody who's working in this space can see that pattern and the work that we need to do. Ethan, as you're thinking about what it takes for you to scale at Beyond Meat, what do you see for the biggest opportunity spaces there? And then what can others really take from that as well, so that everybody engaged in this sector can drive faster together?
Well, first of all, I mean, again, just terrific comments from Bruce and Thomas, and learning quite a bit as well during this. So for me, one of the most important things is we're getting terrific opportunities at some of the largest food chains in the world, whether it's KFC or McDonald's or Subway, et cetera. Any consumer that wants to see this come to fruition should be supporting those organizations and what they're doing. I mean, it takes a lot of courage at the leadership level to do what they're doing. And so we want to make sure that every time we or a competitor gets into a restaurant, possible Burger King, et cetera, people should be supporting that, right? So that's an opportunity for citizens and for consumers just to be part of this movement in a way that is really special. It's, talk about Tesla a lot. It's a $60,000 investment. This is a $5 investment, and you can speak your values and do that very simply. So I think that's an important thing. I agree on the research and development side. Certainly having the government get behind this, but in two ways. One, public resources available. Bruce touched on this a little bit. If we are able to use land more efficiently, which we will be able to do, again, that 93% statistic, what do we do with that land? How do we make sure the farmers continue to be very successful in their own livelihoods? And there's a huge role that the U.S. Landscape can play in combating climate, right? So let's not just think about that as land that we're just not going to use. Let's use it to cool our planet, right? And so lots of opportunity for growth in agriculture through this. It's not a threat to agriculture. It's actually one of the biggest. We look at the innovation that occurred in the digital economy, where you had the corridor in Boston or Silicon Valley, tech corridor in Virginia outside DC. Huge wealth was created, but not in the agricultural communities. This is their turn. This is the opportunity for agriculture to innovate and make a huge amount of wealth in the process. So I'm looking.
Yeah, Ethan, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we've been talking about the role of innovation and investment, but we haven't talked about the need for this transition. And Bruce, you touched on transition versus disruption. If we don't think about these just transitions for our rural communities, we will have real challenges on our hands, and that's certainly a big driver. Thomas, give us a 2-minute view on what it really takes in your mind to drive this acceleration. I think Bruce and Ethan have both shared some great examples with us. What would you build on at your close for people to take away and really start to act on?
So first of all, I hope that people are walking away from this discussion with renewed optimism. Solutions do exist, solutions are out there. Forget about doom and gloom, forget about COVID. I mean, those things are very real. Just as real are the solutions that we can choose to implement or not. And I think that's a critical thing here. We all have a choice, and we can decide, and we are the masters of our future destiny. And so we have a responsibility here. But the solutions do exist. The technologies are coming together at a very rapid clip. We just yesterday had our first harvest in our brand new facility in Chicago, which is 10 minutes from downtown Chicago. And this facility will be pretty rapidly doing the equivalent in chicken nugget, if you will, of 500,000 chicken, without the chicken poop, obviously. So there are solutions, they are there. Yes, science plays a role. We think of science as the language in which you ask questions to nature and you try to understand this is how you decipher nature through science. And we believe that there is no reason to be excessively gloomy. I mean, we're really very optimistic. The
Thank you.
victory is it's not sure, but we believe there is the fight is winnable, and we feel very strongly that way. And it is a systemic thing, so we need to band together. I'm happy when people buy Ethan's product or Impossible's product. I hope that they will buy ours as well. But what matters more is that they buy products of this category.
Absolutely. I think that says it all. And being able to close on the spirit of optimism and seeing the types of innovation that is translating to both real opportunity and taste and health benefit and planetary benefit is exactly why we're all here. I'm incredibly inspired by the three of you and the sectoral leadership that you're all demonstrating and how you really work to bring others along, both through partnership and inspiration. So I've learned a lot as well in our conversations here today. Ethan, Bruce, and Tom, I'd like to thank you both, or thank all three of you for everything that you're contributing and for the conversation here today. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Sam for any closing comments for this part of the session. But it's great to see the business leadership and innovation and spirit that we can bring to these urgent translations.
Thank you so much, Diane.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Diane.
everybody. What an amazing panel. I have nothing to add except we'll be getting into the next panel on valuing and measuring economic success in about 10 minutes. So join us for that. And thank you all for these amazing contributions. All right, we'll see everybody in about 10 minutes.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.